Hi, welcome back to another video of this learning C++ journey. So in the previous video in lesson 7 we started learning about classes in C++. So I hope you guys got the basic idea about the classes. So in this tutorial we are going to learn more about the classes. So the topic that we are going to discuss in this tutorial is going to be constructors and destructors. So let's start. Let's talk about the definition of a constructor. So constructors are special kind of functions, and whenever you create an object of a class, a constructor is called automatically. Okay, so this is the basic definition of a constructor, and also the constructors are functions but they have no return types. So by default, we have a default constructor. That means that no arguments are received and nothing is happening, and it is an empty constructor. So if I create an object of this test class, let's say I create T1 and I run this program, a constructor and destructor was called automatically by default, but you can't see it on the output screen because they are empty. Okay, by nature they have no printing message and they are not receiving any kind of parameters. Let's say you want to see the behavior of constructor, or you want to explicitly define the constructor by yourself. So the syntax for the constructor is that you have to do it in a public section first of all. The reason for doing it or initializing it in a public section is that you will create objects outside the class, obviously. So when you create an object, the constructor has to be called automatically. So if the constructor is in private section, it can't be called in your main function. So for that reason, you must initialize your constructor within your public region. So we will put our constructor here in public region, and then the syntax for the constructor is write the class name, and an empty constructor or default constructor are such kind of constructor that they receive no parameters. Okay, and they have nothing within them, like they are not even initializing some values, but we want to see the behavior. So let's print out a message saying that I am a constructor. Okay, so we have a message constructor. Now in my main function, as you guys can see, that I am not calling this function here, but if I have created an object, as I told you earlier in the definition, the constructor is called automatically. So we will see this message even though we are not printing it. Okay, so let's see the message. Let's run our program. So here you guys can see that a message has been printed saying that I am a constructor. So this shows that whenever you create an object, a constructor is called automatically. So it is an empty constructor, that's why you are not passing any arguments with the object. Now let's talk about the destructor. So destructors are also specialized kind of member functions that they are called when an object goes out of scope. Like when object is ended, they are called automatically. So let's have a look. So to initialize the destructor explicitly, the syntax for it is use a tilde, and then you will use the class name test and an empty arguments. Also we will print a message saying that I am a destructor. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's run this program. So it is showing you that I am a constructor, I am a destructor as well. So this shows you that when the object was created, first this function was called automatically, that is called the constructor, and after that this function was called, that is called the destructor. Okay, so now if I create more objects, these are called more. Okay, so let's say that we create a T2 object. So now we will have two constructors, one constructor for one object and two destructors, one destructor for each object. So this is the basic concept of the constructor and the destructor. So just to put them in the simple words, you can imagine that the starting line, the starting point of your object is the constructor, and the ending point and the ending step of your object is going to be a destructor. Okay. So this was a little introduction to the constructor and destructor concept. Now let's see what else we can do with the concept of constructor. So it is very important and also it can be very useful as well. Let's have a look. Let's say I have some private section data and I'll call it as integer A, integer B. So I have two integers. Now these two integers are in private section, so I can't access them in our main function directly. So what options do I have? I can use some get functions, like I can use some member functions in public that can initialize some values to these variables. I can use getters and setters as well. And I can make use of the constructors as well. In that way, I do not have to make any kind of other functions. Just what I have to do, I have to receive some arguments integer AA, and I have to receive another argument integer BB. Now why I am not writing two words as same? Because we are dealing within the same class, so these should not have the same names. Okay, because the compiler will get confused if I write A is equals to A. So which A and which A? Here is another method and one keyword that is called this keyword, but we will discuss that in future. Okay, but for now we will just keep it simple like this, and we will receive some values and we will initialize our variables by those values. Now what's happening here? Let me tell you that as we know that whenever an object is created, a constructor is called. So what is going to happen when I create an object? A constructor is called. So this is our constructor. Now we have a parameterized constructor. That means that we are passing some arguments here. So if you are passing some arguments to the constructor, then you must declare your object with the arguments as well. But if you are interested in using empty objects as well and empty constructor as well, you have to mention it separately. But let me just show you. Now if I run this program, we will have an error. Now why do we have an error? Because we have explicitly define our constructor. Now compiler is expecting us to pass some parameters within our object, because the constructor that is going to be called by now is this constructor with parameter. Now what's the solution for this? You can have an empty constructor like this with no values. So now if you pass an empty object, this constructor will be called, and if you pass two variables, this constructor will be called. Now let's run this program. So as you guys can see that we have successfully run this program. Okay, now let's pass some values and then print some values. So first of all, we will pass some values. So like I'll say 1 and 2. Okay, so these values are passed and the constructor is going to be called automatically. So these will get called automatically. Now we will have some function that will print out those values for us. So print, we will have void function print, okay, and we will print these values. So cout A is a and cout B is B. Okay. Ended. Now let's run this program. But first of all, we have to call the print function as well. So print. Run this. Now A is 1 and B is 2. So we have successfully passed our values and initialized our private members with the help of constructor as well. So you can use the constructor, a parameterized constructor, with the help of which you can initialize your private members as well as public members with some specific values as well. So this can be done. You can also perform some operations here over it, operations here. So that operation can be that if A is less than 0, then multiply it by -1, so it becomes +1. So you can do all those kind of stuff. But you have to have the basic knowledge and basic syntax knowledge of the constructors and how they work. I hope you guys have got the basic idea of the constructors and the destructor, and I guess you have got the idea that we can use the parameterized constructors as well, and parameterized constructors can be used to initialize the values to our member variables as well as apply some conditions over it and then initialize it to the member variables. So now I have a little bit exercise in my mind that we can perform just to practice the constructor concept more. So the first objective is that use constructor to initialize some fixed values to our members, and also use parameterized constructor to set some values to members. So what's going to happen that we will use constructors. With the help of constructors, we will fix some values to our members. But with some parameterized constructor, we will assign our own values that can be changed as well. So let's have a look. I will have two kind of data in my private. One is integer var1, and another is going to be string name. Okay. Now in public, I will have two kind of constructors. One is an empty constructor. So an empty constructor will be called when we want to have some fixed values to these variables. So let's have a look. The syntax is test, and we will write it as a var1 is equals to 0 and name is equals to unknown. Okay, you can write null as well. Okay, so null can also be written instead of unknown. Okay, now let's write test. We will receive some value. First value is going to be an integer, another value is going to be a string. Okay, so string ss. Now what we will do is that we will assign these values to our members. Okay, so let's have a look. We will say var1 is equals to AA, and we will say name is equals to SS. Now we will design our print function with the help of which we can print these values as well. So see out the var1 is equals to var1 endl, and then we will have another cout in which we will say that name is equals to name. Okay, so we have got everything set it up. Okay, now let's have a test class, and we will have object t1. So here I have declared an object with no parameter, so that means that this object will call these values. Okay, this constructor, and it will assign these values to these members. So let's create another object by the name of t2, and this time it will be a parameterized. Okay, so it will call a parameterized constructor in which I'll pass 2 and a string by saying name. Okay, so string name is passed. Now we will print both of these. Okay, let's see what results do we get. Sorry, the second one will be 2. Now let's have a look. So as you guys can see that the first object that called the default constructor in which we had the value of 0 and name, it assigned those values to our members, and the second was according to our need with the parameterized syntax. So this is how it makes your coding much easier and much easier the assigning values process. Okay, let me tell you that how can you copy the whole class into another. So if you say test T3, let's say I have created T3, and if you assign T2 to T3, it can be also done. Now each and every value of T2 has been assigned to the T3 members as well. Now let's print the T3 as well, and let's have a look. So you guys can see that the first is the T1 and second is T2, and also T3 has the same values of T2 due to this initialization. Okay, so you can do this as well. So you see that a constructor can be very useful, and in future when we use constructors more regularly, you will realize that this is very good and a useful concept as well. Okay, here is one more plus thing that I wanted to mention, that there is another syntax for constructors as well. That is, instead of writing the whole this process, you can write it as name, and you will write it as unknown, and after that you will write a var1 and a 0, and remove this. So this is another syntax. You can add a comma here as well. So both syntaxes are valid. This can also be used, and this syntax can also be used as well. So instead of this, you can write if you want to write this constructor in this format, what you can do is to write test in parentheses, then you will write it as this name, and you will keep this one empty. Why? I'll just tell you in a bit, and you will keep this one as well. Now what you will do, as it is a parameterized constructor, so you will say AA, and then after that you will write it as string SS. Now you will write this AA here and this SS here. Okay, so this is the replacement for this. Now if we run the program, it should work. Okay, so we have some error here. Okay, we have just did it oppositely. Variable is here and string is here. Okay, so this was a little bit logical error, not syntax error. Now as you guys can see, it is working perfectly fine. So this is another syntax for writing the constructors as well. So the syntax in simple words is that you will write first the class name. If it is empty, leave these parentheses empty. If it is parameterized constructor, so write those parameters. And then if you want to initialize the members with some fixed value, so you can write within these parentheses with each member name. Or if you want to initialize them with some arguments or parameters received by the user, then you will have to write those variables within your these parentheses with each member. So this was a little intro about constructors and destructors, and I hope you guys got the basic idea of how the constructors and destructors work. And remember one just simple thing, that constructor is the starting point of the object, and the destructor is the ending point of the object. Okay, so to wrap everything up of the object and then finish everything up and clean up the space, the destructor will be called and everything will be finished. So that is the ending line. So this was it for this tutorial about constructors and destructors, and in the next tutorial we will learn more about the classes. So until then, bye.